All right, let's dive in. Today, we're looking at the global EV market, and more specifically, Chinese electric vehicle companies who are going global.
Yeah.
We've got this research report from Galaxy Securities. It's pretty dense.
Yeah, lots of numbers in this one.
Straight from China, though. And it maps out just how these companies are forming industrial clusters abroad.
It's really fascinating. We're not just talking about selling a few cars here and there. This is about establishing a real presence on the world stage.
So, like, how big are we talking?
Well, the report suggests they're aiming for 40%
Whoa.
of the global EV market by 2027.
That's just 3 years away. That's a bold goal.
It is. And to get there, they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. We're seeing a real mix of strategies. Some companies are exporting completely built cars, what they call CBU. Others are setting up CKD assembly lines. So they ship parts and assemble the vehicles locally.
Interesting. So they're adapting to different markets, then.
Exactly. And of course, there are joint ventures with international partners.
So it's not just a one-size-fits-all approach.
Not at all. It's a multi-pronged strategy, very strategic.
But still, 40% market share. That seems incredibly ambitious. What makes them think they can actually pull that off?
Well, government support is a big factor. A lot of countries are really incentivizing both consumers and manufacturers to go electric.
So they're getting a little push from the powers that be.
Exactly. Like Indonesia, they want 1,000 new EV plants by 2035.
Wow, that's a lot of plants.
And Thailand is offering tax breaks to make EVs more appealing to buyers.
I like those kinds of incentives.
Yeah, who doesn't? But, there are always challenges. Indonesia, for example, they have this thing called the TKDN policy.
Okay, what's that?
It's basically a local content requirement. They want manufacturers to use a certain percentage of Indonesian-made components in their vehicles.
Makes sense. I mean, they want to benefit from this, too.
Exactly. This is about building up their own industries as well. So it's not just about selling cars, it's about integrating into the local economy.
It adds a whole other layer of complexity, doesn't it?
It does. But you know what I find fascinating? It's not just the cars themselves, it's the batteries, too.
Right, those are kind of important. And, I mean, Chinese companies are already dominating that market, aren't they?
They are. Companies like CLB and Goshen, they're setting up these massive battery production facilities all over the world.
Wow. It's like they're creating the infrastructure for the future of electric vehicles.
Precisely. They're securing their supply chains, controlling costs. That's a huge advantage when you're aiming for that kind of market share.
So they're playing the long game here.
Absolutely. Now, to really understand how this is all playing out, we should probably take a closer look at some of the key players.
Okay, let's name some names. Who are the big ones, and how are they approaching this global expansion?
Well, BYD, for one, they're going with both CBU and CKD approaches.
So they're being flexible, huh?
Very much so. They're aiming to have over 200 dealerships around the world by 2025.
That's a lot of dealerships in a very short amount of time. They must be pretty confident.
They are. And they're not just building their own dealerships from scratch. They're also partnering with existing players, like Great Wall Motors. They're focusing heavily on CKD assembly in Southeast Asia.
So finding partners who already have a foothold in those regions.
Exactly. They've also got this partnership with Modus Integrated Technologies in Mexico, which gives them access to North America.
So they're strategically positioning themselves across the globe.
Very much so.
Oh.
And then there are the sales and distribution networks. This is another area where they're getting creative.
Well, yeah, if you want to sell all those cars, you got to get them to the buyers.
Right. So some, like BYD, are building their own dealerships. But others are partnering with existing giants, like Head & Mobility and the Emil Frey Group in Europe.
Those are big names. They already have those massive networks set up.
Exactly. And then you've got these new players emerging, companies like AC Mobility and River Automotive Co. They're specializing in EV distribution and offering these new innovative sales models.
Okay.
Things like online platforms, flexible financing, subscription services. They're really trying to shake things up.
So they're not just adapting to the existing market, they're trying to create new ones. This is getting pretty interesting.
It is, and it's just the beginning. We're just scratching the surface here.
I know. This is a lot to unpack, and we're going to dig even deeper after the break. Stay with us.
Welcome back. We've been talking about how Chinese electric vehicle makers are expanding globally, and it's clear they're not just dipping their toes in the water, they're diving right in.
Yeah, and we were just starting to get into some of the specifics about how they're using technology to set themselves apart.
Right. I mean, you can't just build an electric car these days and expect to stand out. There's a lot of competition.
Exactly. So what are they doing to push the envelope?
Well, let's take MG, for example. They've been in Europe for a while now, and they're really pushing the boundaries with their tech. especially with batteries.
Okay, so what kind of battery tech are we talking about?
Well, for one, they're using this CTP or cell-to-pack technology in some of their models.
Cell to pack, huh? What's the advantage of that?
Basically, it allows them to get more out of the battery pack itself. They can fit more cells into the same space.
So more efficient use of space then? Does that translate to better range for the car?
Yeah, absolutely. And can also help with weight reduction, which is always a good thing with EVs.
Makes sense. Are there any specific models where we're seeing this technology in action?
The MG ZS EV, for instance, that one's already pretty popular.
Yeah.
And they've got this new MG4 electric coming out, which is generating a lot of buzz.
So MG is definitely a company to watch then.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And they're not slowing down anytime soon. They've got plans to release like 10 new electric plug-in hybrid and range-extended electric vehicles by 2025.
10. That's ambitious.
It is, but it shows you how committed they are to electrifying their lineup.
So they're all in, huh?
Yeah, you could say that. And they're not the only ones. Great Wall Motors is another company that's making some big moves. They're really focused on this CKD assembly, especially in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier, using those local assembly plants.
Exactly. Their plant in Thailand is a major hub for them.
And for North America, they partnered with Modis Integrated Technologies.
Right, that's right, in Mexico. So they're really strategically positioning themselves all over the map.
Smart. But it's not just about location, it's about the partnerships, too. Who else are they working with to gain that competitive edge?
Well, they've got this partnership with AMK. They're working with BHSNS and pre-TTL PEX, too.
So a lot of collaboration going on.
Definitely. And even bigger news, they've actually partnered with Stellantis.
Whoa, Stellantis. That's a major player in the auto industry.
It is. It's a huge deal for Great Wall Motors to be working with a company like that.
Gives them a lot of credibility. And access to resources, I imagine.
Absolutely. It's all about leveraging those existing networks and expertise.
It's like they're building this global alliance to navigate this complex market.
That's a great way to put it. So you've got these companies like MG and Great Wall Motors really shaking things up.
They are, and then you've got companies like BYD that are going all in on building their own dealerships.
Yeah, they're still aiming for over 200 dealerships worldwide by 2025.
That's a lot of dealerships to build in such a short amount of time.
It is, but they're also leveraging existing relationships, like their partnership with Saga in Brazil.
Right, so a mix of approaches.
Exactly. And then you've got companies taking a different route altogether, partnering with those existing giants like Hayden Mobility in Europe.
We were just talking about them, yeah. Stern Auto, Sanger, Glenicke, they're all in the mix.
It's really interesting to see how different companies are choosing different paths.
But at the end of the day, it all comes down to consumer perception, right? I mean, how are people reacting to these Chinese EV brands?
That's the key question. So far, the response seems to be pretty positive.
What are people saying?
Well, from what I've seen, they're impressed with the technology, the designs are modern and sleek, and of course, the price is competitive.
So hitting all the right notes.
They seem to be.
Mm-hmm.
But, building that trust and overcoming any preconceived notions about quality, that's still going to be a challenge.
It's like with any brand. You have to prove yourself, show that you're in it for the long haul.
Exactly. But it seems like these companies are off to a good start.
Okay, so we've talked about the cars themselves, the partnerships, the sales strategies, but we can't forget about the elephant in the room, right?
And the batteries.
Yeah, the batteries. I mean, we touched on this earlier, but Chinese companies are really dominating battery production.
They are, and that's a huge part of their global strategy. Companies like CALB and Goshen, they're not just building battery factories in China anymore.
They're going global too, huh?
Oh, yeah. They're setting up shop all over the world.
I mean, that makes sense. You got to have the batteries to power all these EVs.
Exactly. It's about securing those supply chains, keeping costs down. It's a smart move.
So what kind of partnerships are we seeing in this space?
Well, CALB, for instance, they're partnering with some Indonesian companies, PT Nekatambang and PT Industri Baterai Indonesia, to build a massive battery factory in Indonesia.
So they're not just focusing on their own market, they're helping to build up the EV industry in other countries too.
Exactly. It's a win-win situation.
But with all this talk about massive battery production, it makes you wonder about the environmental impact, right? And sourcing all those materials ethically.
Oh, for sure. Those are valid concerns. But these companies are aware of that, and they're investing a lot in research and development to make those batteries more sustainable and reduce their environmental footprint.
Good to hear. So it sounds like they're taking those issues seriously.
They are. They know it's important.
Yeah.
So taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture, the rise of these Chinese EV makers, it's really shaking up the whole global automotive industry.
Yeah, the established players are definitely feeling the pressure.
They are. Some, like Volkswagen, they're doubling down on their own EV programs, pouring billions into research and development.
Trying to catch up.
Exactly. Others, like Stellantis, they're choosing to partner with these Chinese companies.
So different approaches, but the same goal.
Right. Everyone wants a piece of the EV pie.
But for the average consumer, all this competition, that's got to be a good thing.
It is. It means more choices, better technology, and hopefully lower prices down the line.
So everyone wins, except maybe the oil companies.
Yeah, maybe not them. But this is about more than just selling cars. It's about transitioning to a more sustainable future.
Absolutely. And these Chinese EV makers are a big part of that.
They are. It's a global effort.
It is, and it's really fascinating to watch it all unfold.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out in the coming years.
We've covered a lot of ground today, and it's clear that the rise of these Chinese EV makers is a story with a lot of twists and turns.
It is, and it's just getting started.
All right, so we've talked a lot about the Chinese EV makers themselves, but I'm curious, how are the big established players reacting to all of this? Are they just sitting back and watching, or are they feeling the heat?
Oh, they're definitely feeling the pressure. I mean, you can't just ignore a force like this coming onto the scene. They're having to adapt, and we're seeing a couple of different approaches.
So what are they doing?
Some companies, like Volkswagen, they're really doubling down on their own EV programs, investing tons of money in research and development, trying to close that technology gap.
Makes sense. They want to stay competitive.
Exactly. But others, like we mentioned earlier with Stellantis, they're actually choosing to partner with those Chinese companies.
Interesting. So it's sort of a if you can't beat them, dream them kind of approach.
Yeah, in a way.
Uh,
It's about accessing that expertise in those supply chains that the Chinese companies have already built up.
so it's a mix of competition and collaboration.
Definitely. It's a fascinating dynamic. But I think what's really challenging for those traditional automakers is that it's not just about building the cars themselves anymore.
Right. It's about that whole ecosystem we were talking about.
Exactly. The Chinese companies, they've really embraced this vertically integrated model where they control pretty much every step of the process, from batteries and raw materials to manufacturing and distribution. And that gives them a big advantage.
Yeah, in terms of cost, efficiency, speed.
Exactly. It's tough to compete with that.
But I guess for consumers, all this competition's got to be a good thing, right? More choices, better technology.
Absolutely. This is a classic case of a rising tide lifting all boats. The competition is forcing everyone to innovate faster, and that's great for the consumer.
So we're seeing those faster charging times, the longer ranges, all those features people are looking for.
And hopefully more affordable EVs in the long run.
So maybe the only ones who aren't thrilled about this are the oil companies.
Yeah, I don't think they're popping champagne over this.
So looking ahead, I mean, it's hard to predict the future, but do you think this is heading towards a world dominated by Chinese EV brands?
It's definitely possible. They've got the momentum, they've got the resources, and they're clearly very ambitious. But I wouldn't count out those established players just yet. They've got a lot of experience, strong brand recognition, and they're not going down without a fight.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out.
It is.
Yeah.
The next decade is going to be crucial for the auto industry.
Well, we've talked about the companies, the technologies, the markets, but it's important to remember this is all happening within a larger context. We're talking about a global shift towards electric mobility with huge implications for the economy, for the environment, for how we all get around.
It's not just about cars, it's about the future. And that future is electric.
And I think that's a perfect place to wrap things up. This has been a fascinating deep dive into a rapidly changing industry. We've learned about the strategies, the challenges, the potential outcomes.
And we've barely scratched the surface.
Exactly. There's so much more to explore, and we'll definitely be revisiting this topic as things continue to evolve. But for now, we want to leave you with one final thought. We focused a lot on the companies, the cars, the technology, but ultimately, this transition to electric mobility is going to have a huge impact on people, on jobs, on skills, on the future of work in the auto sector. So as you're watching all this unfold, remember that human element and think about the ripple effects this is going to have across the globe.
Great point. It's something we should all be paying attention to.
It is. So thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep those wheels turning and those minds curious.